because I started off at 13 years old, and I was actually recording at that time because I went on to make 78s in those days. We went direct to waxing, unlike today. So I've seen a lot of changes in the recording industry, but I'd always just regarded making records as being a sort of a second string to my bow, as it were, because I've always thought of myself mainly as a stage performer. And so when I came out to England, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of make the London Palladium and things like that. So even then I thought of records as just being a second string, you know. And so nobody was more surprised than I was, Martin, when that record made number one and those millions of sellers. You know, I just couldn't believe it. It was all happening at once.
No, and the other thing, of course, is at that time, rock and roll was the thing, wasn't it? Early 60s, the Beatles hadn't arrived yet, and it was still rock and roll. But I think
Yes, it was.
Your roots are really more firmly placed in country, aren't they?
Well, yes, they have, because in Australia, of course, that was the music that was always around me at that point. And so I was very influenced by country music. Although my influences have gone beyond that, they are basically that. You know, I started that way. I must just tell you, too, that your end of the world there in Leicester, that was where I made my first public appearance as top of the bill in the De Montfort Hall. I remember going there. It was a Sunday concert. I remember doing it, and it was just the beginning of a long tour that I did. You know, that's where I made a lot of my fans, and they've stuck with me all these years. You know, and it's just wonderful. You know, I can't get over how long people have stuck with me.
Well, a lot of people would think, oh, well, you know, Australian man born in Sydney. You're actually born just down the road in Coventry, weren't you?
Yes, I was. And I spent quite a bit of my time, of course, in Birmingham, Coventry, and then I moved down to Ealing, and then we moved back up to Birmingham, and then once the war was over, we went back to Australia. Both my parents are Australians, you see, Martin, and that's why I went back to Australia then. Yes.
Well, who were you influenced by in the early days, Frank?
I guess a lot of my influences came through people like Hank Williams, who at that stage, of course, was very much a country artist. Wolf Carter, who was a Canadian singer who yodeled. I guess he had a lot of influence on me. I think you could tell that. And people like Frankie Lane in the pop industry. And gosh, there were so many influences I had at that time. I didn't sort of follow one particular influence. I suppose if I have more probably of Roy Orbison in me than any of them have. He was a big influence on my early career too. And I think you can hear that too in the influences when I'm singing.
I played I Remember You, and there is a story behind that in the fact that nobody was around apparently in those days to play the 3-chord country guitar, and so you had to do it yourself.
That's right, because the guys that were in the studios at the time, Martin, were actually playing sort of barred chords, you know, like orchestra chords. And I still like that sort of country sound, which is open, ringing sound on the guitar. So I had to sort of show the musicians what I wanted to have, you know. So they said, well, get up and do it yourself. It is incredible, isn't it, Martin? You know, the last count, I think it was something over the 5 million mark overall, you know, which was just absolutely incredible.
It was one success after another, though. I mean, did you find yourself just being swept along by the success?
You know, the funny thing is, you think it's going to go on forever. When it started to happen, and, you know, you just got, once that fourth number one came up, I thought, oh, well, this is going to go on, you know. But because it doesn't, and it can't go on forever. But nonetheless, the record sales that I've had ever since then, I've had several more number ones, not necessarily here in Britain, but on the continent and, you know, in America as well. So it sort of, it just seemed as though it was still going to go on forever, you know. And of course, the record sales still pumping out. I mean, I've had several albums released over the last few years, but there's a lot of compilations still coming out.
Your story, the book, is great encouragement to a lot of people in terms of hope. I mean, the support you had from your wife, the messages of hope and everything that you received from your fans and your show business friends. But, you know, many people seriously thought that the illness was going to mean the end of your career and possibly the end of your life as well.
Well, to me, it seemed as though it was, actually, Martin. I've got to be honest with you. At that stage when I had collapsed lungs and what have you, and I heard the doctor turn around to the press and say that he'll never sing again, the bottom dropped out of my world. And I think you can appreciate that because my whole life had been dedicated to this profession. And so when I came out of it, I was on a low for a long period of time. And I needed the love of people around me. I needed the love of my family around me, which I had. I was very lucky there. But then, because I met with my wife, Carol, And she was the one who really sort of put the ice on the cake, as it were, because she was the one who supported me and pushed me and said, you can do it and get out there and do it. And so a lot of these accolades that you just mentioned that I've had recently, I got the award, but I've got to give credit to my wife, because she should have really got that award, because the way she worked behind me, behind the scenes, makes a lot of difference.